This show is intended for all audiences, but some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener caution is advised.
You're listening to The Quest, Advancing the Art of Role-Playing, the show where we talk about role-playing in all of its forms, from tabletop to LARP and even cosplay. This is where we offer tips and tricks to role-players, new and old, hero or GM, and where we share our passion for role-playing and collaborative storytelling with you. The Quest is a proud member of the Dancing Giraffe Productions Network. You can learn more about Dancing Giraffe Productions at dancinggiraffe.net, and is brought to you in part by Geek Fan Expo, uniting geeks September 5th through 7th in Detroit, Michigan. You can find GFX on the web at www.geekfanexpo.com or on Facebook and Twitter at GeekFanExpo. Additional funding for the show is provided by MyTechMedic at mitechmedic.com, Browncoat Convention Photography on Facebook at Browncoat Photography and on Twitter at Browncoat Photo, and by the support of listeners like you. You can follow me, your host, on Twitter at IRNerdivore, or you can email the show at thequest@dancinggiraffe.net. And now thank you for joining us on The Quest. I'm your host, Jeff Harvey. Joining me today are Donna Williams, Dave Angel, and Laura Marsh. So let's first, before we get too carried away, let's get a little introductions going on. Donna?
Hi, I'm Donna Jones, and I've been LARPing regularly for the past 6 years. That's my favorite geek. I have been doing a few tabletops. I find that I am more interested in LARPing than tabletops, and I'm pretty knowledgeable on online role-playing, so...
I'm David Angel. I've been role-playing since I was 12, so 17 years now. Video games, LARPing, online role-playing, tabletop role-playing, and many more.
I am Laura Marsh. My primary role-playing experience has been tabletop, but I have dabbled in the LARPing scene, so to speak. But tabletopping is my primary, and I've been doing that for about a decade now, I think.
I'm Jeff Harvey, again, your host. My experience is about 26 years of tabletopping, 15, 16 years of LARPing. I've done basically everything you can imagine. My geek stems everything through video gaming and online role-playing that way, back when it was still online role-playing. So that's your geek pedigree for your hosts today. Today we're going to cover character creation for all games in general, but if we're going to be advancing the art of role-playing, it all starts with creating a character. So the best thing to ask is where to start with building a character.
Find an idea you can get excited about. If things go well, you could be playing this character for an extremely long time or a short time, but still, make sure you're able to enjoy it. Make sure it's something that you're really interested in doing.
Yeah, one of the big keys to creating a character, any character in general, is to be able to do something you're going to have fun with. There are a lot of ideas and ways to build a character, ways to come up with ideas. We can look at literature and, well, the classics, the Greek archetypes. So we can talk about there are three main classes of archetype for the Greek mythology. There's the egos, the soul types, and then there's the third type, which is escaping me at the moment, but I will get to it when we get there. One of the main types is the innocent, and the innocent is your basic character that you'd think of as being your Luke Skywalker almost at the beginning of Star Wars, known as a utopian or traditionalist, or someone who's naive, saintly, they're at least at the beginning, all they really want to do is just be happy. That's their whole goal in life. Usually that advances through most storytelling, that advances into something else, oftentimes into the hero, which is one of the other archetypes we can go into. The orphan, or the regular guy, or gal, whatever your choice may be, this is the person that is just a good old boy, the everyman, the guy next door, very realistic, very down-to-earth. You'd think of this kind of character in like that Michael Douglas movie that I can't think the name of. Anybody?
Which one?
Yeah.
The one
I
where
need to be a
falling
little more
down?
specific.
Or?
Falling Down, that's the one, yeah. That or you could go into Office Space, that's a good one. Those guys are the everyman heroes. They fit into the Greek archetype. Then you have the hero, which is obviously your big bad, anything Vin Diesel ever played, which is your warrior, your crusader, rescuer, hero, soldier, your dragon slayers, the whatever. It's your Legolas's and your Aragorns and stuff like that. Then you have your caregivers, which are your saints, your altruists, parents, helpers, supporters, that kind of thing. Which there's if you think to C.S. Lewis's novels, you've got Lucy, who is the caregiver of the group. She's the one she's very strong, she's very stalwart, but she's also the one that's helping the party. She's the one that is guiding them and giving them that nurturing bit. Then you have the soul types, which you have the explorer, which are the people like, your Jean-Luc Picards, your Captain Kirks, the guys who are going out there and doing green women because they can. They're seekers, they're wanderers, individualists, pilgrims, that kind of thing. You have your rebels, which is basically anything Clint Eastwood would ever play across the board, except his later stuff where he's just hurting everybody and being mean to everybody. But it's also like an outlaw, that kind of thing. A revolutionary, the wild men, misfits, Mel Gibson from Lethal Weapon. Mel Brooks is doesn't know. So then you've got the lover characters, which is your partner's friends and things like that. Usually, your Juliets and your whatever. They're not. I can't think of any hero characters that are the lover, but I'm sure there are some. Maybe Leia early on, but that was just creepy. Because now you're talking about a little incest.
Incest is not wincest.
No, incest is not incest. Then you have the creators, and these are known as your artists, your innovators, musicians, writers, dreamers. Then you have your self types, the jesters, which are pretty much, you can guess what the jesters are going to be.
Dogberry.
Yeah, Dogberry, Danny Kaye, pretty much anything he's played. But then you have your sage characters.
Your Obi-Wan.
Your Obi-Wan, right, exactly. Then you have your magician characters, Rincewind, the magician whose name totally escapes me, and I don't think I knew it anyways, from The Last Unicorn.
Schmendrick?
Schmendrick. Yes.
And Laura comes through with the win.
Schmendrick the Magician, yes. I just downloaded that book, too. There was a thing on Facebook that was going around where you could buy 6 books and pay like $1 for them or whatever. I ended up paying a lot more than that. It was donate and pick up 6 books, so I picked up 6 books. Nice. Anyway, you've got the ruler, which is known as the boss, the leader, the aristocrat, kings, politicians. Then you've also got your fantasy types. And if you're talking about role-playing, you're obviously going to talk about your fantasy archetypes. Nothing is more iconic in fantasy role-playing than Dungeons & Dragons. And that is where the four main archetypes come from, which is your fighter, your rogue, your wizard, and your cleric. And your fighter is obviously your guy who's combat abilities and lacking the magical abilities. Then you've got your rogues, they're stealth, they've got the social skills, they're more do everything but do nothing well, and they're the ones who take all the traps right in the face. Then you've got your wizards, which are your spellcasters. Usually they're pretty weak. They tend to kill your whole party accidentally when they start casting balls of fire, and they're not counting radiuses on spells.
Damage, man.
Right. Then you've got your clerics, which are your healers, and so on and so forth. When you're building a character under any of these archetypes, one of the things you definitely want to do is maintain your GM's vision of the campaign. I'm currently running a Pathfinder game and a half. I'm running a half Pathfinder game that we're not doing anything with yet. But it's very important that if you're going to make a character for the campaign, that you don't make something that is going to be completely out of place and alter the GM's storytelling ability.
Right, I think it's extremely important to make sure you talk and check in with your GM. You don't want to create a character and put all the work into it and realize it has no place in that setting whatsoever.
Right.
And then you're the weirdo.
Yeah, and it's good for you too, because if you make a character that doesn't fit with the setting, you can end up being completely useless and not any fun to play.
Yeah, I've been involved in games, tabletops mainly, where you've had that one individual that needs to come up with something that's just not part of the setting, and you have to sit there and explain to them, no, it doesn't work. Seriously, come up with something better. Come up with there's a lot of stuff here you can come up with. No, I want to play this.
Yeah,
you're just not going to have any fun.
It's happened to me as a GM a few times where I've been running a game of, like, say, Legend of the Five Rings by AEG, which is probably my favorite game. And all right, we're going to run a game of all lion characters, and everyone's a lion. Everyone makes a lion. You're a military group. All work for the same lord, so on and so forth. And then you end up getting one guy who's like, well, I want to play a Kakita, but that was born lion and this and that, and sometimes it doesn't work. So try to keep it in mind that your role playing is always collaborative storytelling. So if you're going to help the GM tell a story, help him tell the story that he had thought of originally. Otherwise, he's going to have to either kill your character off and dance happily on his way to the car when he's leaving, smirk behind the Mountain Dew. There's a reason GM screens exist. Either the GM is going to have to change the story considerably, or you're just not going to have any fun playing in this person's campaign.
Right, it's good to talk to your GM to know what they are looking for and what their hard limits are as well.
Right.
And usually, if you have a GM that's playing a little bit more liberal with the story, is running stuff of the less of a structured story and more of playing off of what the players want, you still want to ask them, and they'll probably be open to just about any idea. But when you come up with like, I want to be a quarter vampire, quarter angel of God, quarter this, quarter, and they look at you and say, "No, that's dumb." Maybe you should listen. It's probably a good idea. The rest of the party might end up killing you.
Right. Try not to make a decent character and then have flying whales.
Yeah.
Then another thing, the next step in that is going to be, of course, trying to maintain a connection to the other characters in the party. You want to be able to do something that's going to play well with the rest of the group. You don't want to create a character that is going to interfere with the way the rest of the party wants to play.
Well, also, it can be, I always ask everybody else what they're playing. So what are you guys playing? What are you guys playing? Because I like to make a character that meshes well with those characters, or maybe has some sort of prior relationship with the character. Maybe they're, your family or something like that. And it can really give you good ideas about what would be good to go along with the other players' ideas.
Some of the most entertaining campaigns that I've heard of or been part of had the situation where the players sat down, came up with their characters together, sat down and figured out, okay, what did we do 5 years before the campaign started? What did we do 7 years before the campaign started? Oh, we just met. Why would I not just shoot you in the head? And you develop that rapport, so as you start playing the game out, you can play that off during the slow times, or it gives you your characters will do different things based off of what's coming on, based off of what they did before. So coming up with a backstory that is more joint to in a tabletop setting, and it even works in a LARP setting if you have a group that's with you that you go out together with, and you can have a joint backstory and know how you connected.
And it can be a challenge. I mean, you're playing a character that you've never actually interacted with these other characters, but you're playing a character that is supposed to have. We played an Epic game one time. All the characters knew each other from before the game actually started in some way or another, and we spent a lot of time just planning out what our relationships, what our prior relationships were to each other, and what we thought of each other, and how we got along, and then to be dropped into that situation and having never actually not actually done the role playing, it was kind of a challenge to play characters that knew each other when we didn't actually know each other.
It's particularly hard to play characters that are already established characters that don't have any connection, because you've never played, especially if you've never played the character. It's if you start playing characters that are over 5th or 6th level, especially like if you're talking D&D, 5th or 6th level, it's an okay place to start. But if you start going higher than that, now you're an established hero, and when you're starting about epic level games, 20th level and more, you had to have gotten 20th level somehow or another. And if you're going to play a game where you're a well-established hero, but you've never played the character, you don't even know what the personality of this character is like. You're not really sure this character would have ever survived this long. And sometimes, as much as dice are supposedly random, dice know what character you're playing, and sometimes they hate that character. So,
I think it's fun though too. It takes some more planning, and you have to put a lot of thought into it. But I think that's half the fun. I like writing characters that have prior connections with other characters.
The epic level game, I was part of that same game, and it was a lot of fun to sit down and actually come up with how this personality worked, where this personality went through, this character, what trials he went through, everything that led up to this point, where the other PCs fit within that storyline. So it came down in the actual character history section, it came down to like writing this epic story that was amazing, and once you got to it, it was really, really cool. The only real difficulty with it is that the story was way cooler than the campaign ended up being in a couple of spots. So you're like, you get to that point where you face palm. You're like, why the hell did that just happen?
yeah, why can't we run through the history of the character we just created?
because that was just let's go back and do that.
Yeah. One of the things that what do you think of when you're making a character? What are the basics and what are going, we want to talk about going beyond the very basics of the four base archetypes, or even the archetypes that we talked about, the Greek archetypes. For me, one of the things I use to go beyond the basics is I try to think of a character that is deep. If you think about the depths of your character and think about the things that you're going to do, you can build something that is more intense and more complicated in the role playing. And one of the ways to do that is to talk about the 20 questions. Not every game calls it the same thing, but you've got for me it was 7th Sea by AEG. That game was the
Favorite
epitome.
game.
Yeah, it's a great game. It was the epitome of playing an archetypal, heroic, deep character. And in that system, there's a set of 20 questions that you can ask yourself and answer as your character. What key elements do you look for to try to go beyond the very basic of your character?
Google is my friend. I have a tendency of Googling just like I was creating a druid character ideas. And then I'll just flip through, different sites and read other people's ideas. And I'm not above stealing somebody's idea, although it's usually not verbatim stealing the idea. It's more looking for inspiration. So I'll take a piece of something somebody else says that they've done, and all I need is a piece to actually branch out and come up with my own ideas.
For me, setting is very, very, very important in the games that I play. Games that are devoid of a certain degree of setting tend to lose my interest very quickly. D&D, I can it's D&D. You just kind of pull out whatever you're going to do. You come up with your, for example, one of your four major adventuring food group archetypes, and you just go with that. But anything outside of that, you come up with you take a look at your setting, you figure out what the setting is, and then you come up with a concept, a storyline that's in there. What hero would you like to see go through? You see a setting that's low fantasy, and you'd like to see a little girl who learns how to use a sword and is forced to run around in the woods and survive with a bunch of people chasing after them. Ta-da, you've gotten yourself an Arya Stark. You come up with those concepts, you see which concepts you would like to see the story play.
For me, it's based a lot on setting as well. What world am I going to go into? What character is going to fit well into that world? And then I'm a really big goal setter. Like, okay, if I'm here, these are the things that I would enjoy getting to and the points that I would like to reach as a character, and what kind of character would be good to get to these points. I jump around a lot when I'm character creating, though.
There was a statement made, when I don't know if it was one of we did in our Zero show or not, but there was you just kind of said it a minute ago, Dave, that it's what you go through, what you want your character to experience. And that's a good thing to build on too, is you think about your character and the things that you will have a lot of fun role playing out, and you can, as Anna said, set goals to try to achieve those things. I've played Star Wars a few times, played a Jedi, and you put forward that idea that you want to experience that turn or that temptation to the dark side, and that's a great way to play your character into something to role play and build towards, and you can have a lot of fun with that kind of thing.
I played in a Vampire the Dark Ages campaign.
Sure, good game.
In fact, the campaign that I was going through was a series of books that they put out at one time called the Transylvania Chronicles, which took you from the Dark Ages to the Modern Knights. And we had to come up with characters that we would want to play for an extended period of time, starting off from the Dark Ages. And I came up with various different concepts because I ended up playing this thing like 3 or 4 times because it was cursed. The group would always fall apart halfway through. But one of the most interesting ones that I went with was I decided to play a Bruja that because in their history they were once very noble knight type people, and in the Modern Knights they have become like anarchist thugs.
Right.
And I thought it would be a really neat concept to play this crusader type that has to watch as his clan begins to decline throughout the years, and how would he react to these sorts of things.
Sure. Yeah, the first vampire character I ever played was a Ravanos, and to me that character was fun because my entire concept of the character was to create havoc amongst the party and to make the GM's life a little bit on the miserable side, because I had no desire to play that game. Turned out to be one of my favorite characters to ever play, and the GM loved it. I mean, she went on to play that game. We played that game for I think 6 or 7 years before it just the game itself fell apart because we all went our separate ways.
My boyfriend is extremely bad for that too. He will literally sit down and go, okay, everyone else is doing this. I'm going to do something so opposite and I'm going to ruin everything. He played a werewolf that specialized in explosives at one point, and like just the entire time went through and was trying to kill everyone, trying to marry the lesbian. It was just ridiculous. It was hilarious to watch. It was great to watch. It was awful.
I've had the fun experience every once in a while with stepping into a game where the GM has lost some control and coming up with a character that ends up being a puppet, or feeding ideas to the storyteller, or giving them an outlet to completely destroy their characters. And I've done so, and I've done so very well.
Yeah, I've been blessed to have you as a one of my players, as well as our friend Derek, who is very similar in that he and I can have our machinations, and the parties, the rest of the party doesn't necessarily know what's going on. It's also fun as a GM to hand a player a piece of paper, have him read it, freak out, and eat the paper. Literally eat the paper.
It tasted like shit.
That was a pretty epic moment.
Those are the kind of games that I really enjoy, and that's things that if you're building your character correctly, and you have ideas of what you want to accomplish as that character, you can help your GM tell a better story. And you might not necessarily have to have that great of a character history. I've played several characters that had zero history at the beginning and ended up being really fun characters who we ended up exploring our back history of that character by just seeing how the character reacted to situations during gameplay and coming up with reasons as to why I would react that way to something. So that's a fun thing to do too.
Sometimes you can also you can develop your character's personality based on the things that happen to you in the game. If your character is really trusting and gets betrayed by someone she, cared about or something like that, then you might change the way you roleplay your character to be a little bit more cynical.
Some of the things you can do when you're trying to come up with some backstory for your characters, you can read the campaign setting books. I know that I'm currently reading Pathfinder, and I'm way behind in the curve here because this game came out in 2009, I think. But I was so opposed to fantasy games I kind of avoided it. But now I'm getting back into it, and I'm realizing that there is it's a really good setting. There's a campaign book that is much like L5R. There's a book called Rokugan, which is there's a very few stats in it, and Pathfinder has a very similar setting book, and you can get a lot of good information from that. And then there's the actual modules, the campaign modules. The pseudo online game that I'm looking to run is I'm going to run the Rise of the Rune Lords, which is a pre-made set of adventures. It's six full-on adventures, and the backstory they have for this is a really good place to start to build characters from. They've got a player book that is common knowledge of the world and common knowledge of the upcoming adventure, things that you already know, and you can come up with some pretty good stuff there. That's always a good thing to do. Obviously, Google is fantastic. You can Google literally almost anything.
Who doesn't use Google?
Yeah, some people that use Bing.
That is a dirty word,
Bah.
sir. Dirty.
Another good thing, I think, can be to actually look up. Doesn't necessarily have to be a campaign book or a book having to do with the game directly, but something that like fiction that is set in the same kind of setting. So, like we're playing a game adventure that is set in the 20s, and I wanted to read something set in the 20s so that I could get in the right mood and hear the slang and everything, so that I could get
Right.
that down. So I read The Diviners by Libba Bray, which is pretty good and is a lot of fun because they use all of that slang from the 20s, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's so great. I wish we still had all of that so much.
White Wolf and AEG both, in a lot of their books, will have a section that suggests here's things to read, here's movies to watch, here are TV shows to check, take a look at, comic books to read, things like that, so that you can get into it. White Wolf had it very heavily for their Aeon series, which was Trinity, Aberrant, and Adventure, where in the early chapters of the book, they had a section like, hey, go check out these movies. Here's some music to play while you're playing the game, so that you could really get an idea of what the setting was like. And if you watch it, you can see a concept that might be a fun one to play as a character. Be wary not to use the exact concept, because people will call it out halfway through. You do it at a LARP, they're going to kick your ass. You do it online, people are, going to make fun of you. And you do it in a tabletop, and it might be able to slide depending on the group, but some people might look and groan and throw popcorn at you.
Yeah, it's a taboo in my games. You definitely don't do it in my campaigns.
But a similar concept, play around with it, throw it around a little bit, and see where it goes.
Yeah, that's if it wasn't for the L5R books, I probably never would have discovered, or not I discovered it soon, to Shiro Mifune and his works. Things like Yojimbo and some of those movies that eventually went on to become Clint Eastwood movies, actually. Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More and those kind of ones.
Also, remember when you're doing LARPs, they usually have world books, setting books, things
Right.
like that you should really look into before you just jump in and decide to create your character that's a ninja and all of this crazy stuff in a medieval setting.
Right, yeah. Despite the fact that Pathfinder has a ninja class, I don't think it fits. But I suppose I have to finish reading the setting book, so maybe it will. Another good place to look is Obsidian Portal. A lot of people don't know what Obsidian Portal is, but Google it and you will find it. It's basically a type of wiki set for each campaign. A GM would go in and create this wiki, and you can find all of your information there, any house rules and character portraits and that kind of stuff. I just use Facebook because Obsidian Portal has a learning curve to it, and Facebook is, everyone's on that all the time anyway. I unfortunately have a lot of groups on Facebook for all the games I play, but I do still go to Obsidian Portal to get information on how other GMs are handling situations in their campaigns, and what other characters have been created for the same style of campaign, or even the same potentially adventure. For example, when I ran the Tomb of Aichaban from Legend of the Five Rings, Obsidian Portal was fairly new then, and I went to it to see how other players survived and what characters were created specifically for that, and I helped the PCs create characters that were able to handle the story better. And we ended up not using any of those characters. We ended up just using established characters and going through it, which was a lot more fun because I like tragedy in my RPGs, and at least 2 characters, I think 3 characters died in that adventure. 3 out of the 5 characters died in that adventure, and then 1 died of his wounds 3 months later. So
He also likes to make people cry in his games.
I do. Emotional response is what I'm all about.
I would say there were 2 that died in the tomb, 1 that died from his wounds 3 months later, and 1 that ended up committing seppuku.
Right,
was
right.
all
That's
over.
what it was. Yep. See, that to me is a successful campaign as a GM.
When there's no one left alive.
When
at
there's
the
no
end.
one left alive and not one person is mad about it.
I have never
Yeah.
met someone that actually comes in with a piece of paper that tells you your character's going to die. You can't cry about it. Don't be a big baby. And then I met Jeff. he does. He will also kill your character for a birthday present, though, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's for me. It's I was running a zombie game in the White Wolf system, and this game unfortunately didn't last very long because we were having a hard time keeping the group together. But it was a really fun game, and I think more PCs got killed by PCs than by zombies. But it
Yes.
made for a really fun,
One
entertaining
in
game.
particular PC.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Derek, the aforementioned Derek, who killed
Dr. Mingala.
Dr. Mingala, killed everybody.
He is so awesome. Like, he was sitting there watching him do it. You didn't expect it was him. You're like, no, it could never really be him.
But see, there you go back to your goals when you're doing character creation. His goal was to survive the zombie apocalypse, and he had nothing else on his sheet of goals. It was survive at all costs. In order to survive in some of these cases, he realized that the zombie virus is contagious, and if you get bit, you're going to turn into a zombie. So if you even got a scratch on your arm, he just assumed it was obviously you were bit, and he killed you. He euthanized you right while you're sleeping. He didn't care.
Not taking
or,
any chances.
Or he'd lock you out of the RV
And let you get eaten.
and let you get eaten. That way, the door was locked, and he made sure that they weren't getting in. There's some other alternative methods to coming up with character creation too. You can do an inverted character build, which is where you basically roll your stats first and then see what you get.
Come up with the character skill list that you want, the type of. I mean, in D&D, you roll up your stats, and then you decide which class you're going to go based off of which is the highest stat, that sort of thing. In certain LARP settings, you come up with the skill setting that you want to be able to use, what you're going to have the most fun with, what you're going to be able to utilize, and you can come up with a character concept outside of that. Even with online role playing, which you have muds, mushes, and there are some servers on MMOs such as WoW and SWTOR and stuff like that, where some people will role play and some people will succeed. A lot of people will fail miserably, but they will come up with the class and character style that they're going to have the most fun with, or that they know how to play the best, and come up with a character concept based off of that, because they want a particular character that's going to be easier to play with.
I have an idea for a DT campaign that I eventually want to run called the B-Roll Crew. And basically what I want to do is, normally when you roll your stats in Dungeons & Dragons, it's roll 4 dice, drop the lowest. I want to run one where it is roll 4 dice, drop the highest, and put them directly in the skills that you want, but you pick your class beforehand. So you pick your class, then you roll, you drop the highest die, and you put them in directly how you get them. So you could have a warrior with an 18 intelligence and a 4 in strength. And I think I think this would be a really fun game to play for about 20 minutes. But I want to run it
Until Brandon throws a book at me.
until Brandon throws a book at me. I want to run it as a B-roll game because I think it would give people a chance to think beyond the character sheet, to be able to play the character they want to achieve. Because if you decide you want to play a rogue, but you end up having a 6 in dexterity and a 22 or something in charisma, you can still play a rogue. You just have to play a different kind of rogue, and you have to think beyond the character sheet, and you're not going to be very successful. But that's why it's the B-roll. And I was going to do this intermingled with my A-roll characters, my A shots. And my thought is, we've got a whole campaign going on, and now there's something really intense happening. We end on a cliffhanger. Next game, B-roll. That way you don't get the satisfaction of having the cliffhanger resolved right away. Come back to it, and the B-roll would be basically, this is a situation where the B-roll characters are doing their heroic part that will affect how the A-roll characters succeed in their task on the next gaming session. So I think you can have a lot of that, and that's just me as a storyteller wanting to have fun and giving the players a chance to step outside of not only themselves but also the characters they normally play, in order to try to see the world that we're playing in slightly different, and to be able to deepen the characters they're normally playing.
Also, in that situation, you really have to start to consider. So you roll your thing up, and you do get that warrior that has an 18 intelligence but a 4 in strength. Well, why did you choose the path of a warrior?
Yeah.
What happened to you? What's going on? Did you run afoul of a deck of many things? Did you
There's a good thought.
did you piss off somebody along the lines? If you end up being that bard that has a 4 charisma and a constitution of 25, did you just sleep with the wrong witch or something? What's
I think the idea of rolling your stats first and then creating a character around the stats is kind of interesting, because it seems like it's more realistic. I mean, people are born with certain abilities and are good at some things, and most people do decide what to do with their lives based on what they're good at. So It's kind of an interesting idea that your character is born with these stats. So what would a character born with these stats end up doing? So I think it's kind of an interesting idea. I haven't done it before.
It also gives, if you cannot come up with a concept in some other way, it is the perfect way to randomly come up with a concept.
Yep.
I mean, you can pull out a bunch of different archetypes or builds and lay them out, and then assign them 1 from 20, and then roll a d20 and see which one you get. or you can just roll up your stats, and it's the perfectly random way to come up with, here's the concept that I need to play off with.
Going in the same direction, though, you can also, a lot of games have advantages and disadvantages that you can get. And for me, I build a lot of characters in L5R, like even when we're not playing, I build characters in L5R like at least once a month. And I do that, basically, I think of a person that I want to, I might want to do, or, you know, male, I usually come up with which sex I want the character to be and what clan I want them to be, male, female, lion, scorpion, that's pretty much all I ever make. Crane. I do make Phoenix. I love the Phoenix a lot. Anyway, then I go through and I read the disadvantages and advantages, and I figure out which ones, which one in particular out of all of those ones is the one that is the most prominent for that character. So if I go through and I decide I'm going to make a scorpion, and I read through and I for some reason this time epilepsy sticks out to me, and the character becomes an epileptic, and then I go through and other things that would, how has epilepsy affected this character's life in this traditional role-playing setting, and then I will go and I will find other advantages and disadvantages. So this person has epilepsy, so they know that they have to keep better secrets. So I will build the character in such a way that they will be able to overcome the physical handicap through mental discipline. Or I built a character that was an assassin, but I wasn't using any of the assassin classes. I wanted to play a basic Bayushi warrior. So the best way I thought of for this character was I wanted to have someone who was very, very beautiful. And I thought of the Black Widow type of character. So she had Benton's Blessing and Dangerous Beauty and all of these socially alluring qualities to the character. And by going through all the things I did, all the courtier functions and everything else, I basically wrote up a character who, in all intents and purposes, role-played like a courtier, but ended up being a rank 4 Bushi and could basically do nothing in the court style other than through my quality of role-playing. But in a fight, in that one instance, when she lures you back to her room, you are dead. So I think that's a really good way to do it, too. And 7th Sea is a good one for that, too.
7th Sea, White Wolf was also fairly decent. I am a culprit of doing this a lot. Usually because you have a certain maximum number of advantages and disadvantages you can pick up. If I can't come up with a different, with a specific concept, there are times where I'll sit down and I'll just start going through and making a mishmash of advantages and disadvantages and going, all right, let's see here. What do we got? All right, I can do this. L5R, the epilepsy was exactly one of the coolest characters that I wrote up that I never actually got a chance to play. I was going through and I was developing, and they had an advantage that was special gift or something like that. It was like a 6th sense. And I read the description on it a little bit, and I came up with that, and then I had to balance it out with its disadvantages, and I decided, well, epilepsy would be perfect. Epilepsy, oftentimes they say they've been touched by the kami or touched by the gods, that sort of thing. And so I matched them up and then started to develop what would this particular character be? What role would they play in this society? And then and develop the character off of that. Coming up with potential story ideas for the future and how to play the character and where the character would go, I've done in that fashion too. I've sat down and had to come up with a character on the fly, again in L5R, where I'm sitting there trying to come up with, like, okay, what to do. Oh, I got this idea. Unendingly in love with his liege. Oh, and also has this curse that means at some point he's going to betray her and kill her.
The Yogo curse, one of the greatest things you can do in that game.
And I'm sitting there like going, I need to come up with ideas. I got this. Hey, Jeff, take a look at that. Is that fine? Yeah. All right, let's go.
I will almost approve anything that. For L5R, there's a hard limit of 10 points and disadvantages. But if you come up with a set of disadvantages and a good reason for them, a good story, a good concept, I've had characters that have had 15, 20 points and disadvantages, and I warn people before they play my games that if you take the disadvantages, you better be ready to roleplay them because they're going to come up. And rarely have I ever failed to deliver on that task in any game that lasted more than 10 or 15 gaming sessions. Another thing you can do, though, if you're looking at trying to develop an as you go kind of thing, one of the things that I do, which is I look at pictures, and it's a thing I picked up in 4th grade. You look at a picture, maybe one line from the picture, and then you build a character based on that. Actually, today on Facebook there was Weird Tales put up a post, and there was a picture of this giant ogre-looking thing, kind of happy face with a big grin on his face, and he had two little kids on his back, and a couple of crows on this thing he was wearing on his backpack. And they were asking people to write a 1-paragraph opening to a book or a story with that. So I wrote one, and that kind of thing to me is extremely inspiring. We figured out yesterday it was Chris Van Alsing. Is that his name?
Chris Van
Allsburg.
Allsburg. The Mysteries of Harris Burdick.
Yeah, fantastic book that my 4th grade teacher, Mr. Adams, brought into school one day, and he told everybody to take one picture, or a group of people, usually one person or a group, that take one picture, write a story about what's going on in this picture and why it is, and write a story that explains this picture.
Chris Van Allsburg is the person who did the Polar Express, did the illustrations in the Polar Express. He might have written it too. I can't remember if he's just the illustrator or the author illustrator.
Yeah,
But
the
he
illustrations
did a
are
book
fantastic.
Called Mysteries of Harris Burdick, that is just black and white illustrations with like a 1-line thing that goes along with it. And it's the entire purpose is to look at the picture and write something based off the picture. So like the one on the cover is a picture of a guy in his house holding a chair above his head, and under the carpet there's like a lump under the carpet that looks like it's probably moving towards him. And I can't remember what the line underneath it is, but it's just these really cool illustrations that are great for inspiring ideas.
Yeah, apparently there's a book that came after that one called The Chronicles of Harris Burdick, which are also, I guess, famous authors who wrote stories based on the pictures that he had in the Mysteries of Harris Burdick. And I haven't read it yet, but it is available on Nook and Google Books, and I'm going to buy it later today after I go cash a check and have some money in my account to spend on books, rather than just having money for bills. So that's a definite way to do it. Another person to use, another way you can do it is DeviantArt. Lots of stuff on DeviantArt.
Yeah.
I must admit that
There's
I
a lot of junk on DeviantArt too. Sometimes
Yeah,
you have to
there's-
sift
well,
through the bad stuff. but-
admittedly
You
though pirate a lot of pictures from DeviantArt.
you have Deviant. You have a lot of junk on DeviantArt. You have a lot of really good stuff.
But
on
you got a lot of
DeviantArt.
good stuff too.
When you're looking for fantasy stuff, you can just like pile through that and you'll find it. No problem.
Right.
You also have Larry Elmore and Louis Royo.
Yeah, Louis Royo
Um,
I have probably 50 or 60 pictures of Louis Royo stuff that I picked up for my Conan campaign that I ran.
I
and-
love Louis Royo. He's awesome. He's not for kids, but he's awesome.
No. But you can take a look at these things, like pile through DeviantArt, or look up fantasy images on Google Images or whatnot, and see a scene or see a person or something like that, and it can give you an idea for a story arc. There was a MUD that I used to be on, a text-based online role-playing game, that to come up with characters, a lot of people would go on DeviantArt and whatnot, and they would look up things, and they would see a character, and they would go, oh, I want to do that character. I want to, what could I do with that character? And they would come up with a storyline, and anytime people would ask, what their character looked like and whatnot, they could provide that picture for them. Even in LARP situations, people have taken a look through pictures and seen images or scenes or something like that, and they go, "Ooh, I'd love to go out and look like that," and they try and model their garb to look like that, the weapons that they pick up, and try to develop a character that would personality-wise fit that look. So
Sometimes it's okay to just have a general idea of what you want the character to be too, and then to sort of develop the character as you go.
Right. I was just thinking, Dave said something a second ago that brought me on to where did you get your favorite character concept from? Like, for me, I shouldn't say my favorite character concept, but the character that I've played the longest, which is Jonas for the LARP that we play. I came up with the character concept based on my Diablo character, actually, that I played, Diablo 1, Jonas Brimblade, the Barrel Slayer. And the only reason I made this character. He's a fighter in Diablo who got some magic because we played forever and eventually became so powerful in the game that I couldn't get hurt by anything anymore. So I just went around killing all the barrels. And I went and played that character. I went with that goal in mind in when I went to play Kanar. The only difference was I wanted to be a paladin who did all those things. And obviously it didn't work out for me. I turned out to be a pretty despicable individual.
My longest running character, of course, has been at the same LARP. And to be perfectly honest, the character concept came up from the initial character concept came up from a handful of things. It was originally the game had something called subclasses, and they had a subclass called Swashbuckler. And I read the description and I was like, cool, I want to do that. And so that kind of formed my character concept. What gave it a little bit more life outside of that was Benedict from Much Ado About Nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And that was, I took the style I tried to lean more towards was Renaissance Italy, Venice and Tuscany, that sort of thing, and took that basic, carefree, carousing personality, stuck it in the world, and as time went on and I started interacting with people and whatnot, the character grew. But the initial character concept was from basically a description of the subclass and Shakespeare.
Much Ado About Nothing is about one of my all-time favorite plays. I liked the Kenneth Branagh version of that, and I really want to see the Nathan Fillion one.
I had a D&D character that I actually created based on, vaguely based on a character from a book series that I read called The Wayfarer Redemption by Sarah Douglas, and that's actually one of my favorite books. It's a trilogy. It's 2 trilogies, but we won't get into that because the second trilogy sucked. But but she, I played her for a long time, and I actually used an illustration from one of the books as my character description, which coincidentally was illustrated by Louis Royo.
My longest running character is also from the same LARP, and my entire character concept was handed to me as an NPC. They're like, here, we want you to do this, and we want it to kind of be like this, and here's a skill set that you can use. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to make it mine. And I enjoyed it so thoroughly that I really made it mine and turned it into an actual character, and I've been playing it ever since.
Yeah, one of the nice things about character creation, and one of the ways that you can think about how you want to create your characters when you're thinking about advancing and developing your character longer term. Every game has its own way of character development. Most time it's earning experience points to do whatever. Some of the things you want to do when you create your character originally, if you build your character and you've got these goals in mind that you want to do, and you've got your advantages and your disadvantages and your skill set and your dice rolling, and everything is set and everything is exactly the way you want it when the character's created, but the character isn't working out the way you wanted it to. Like for me, for example, I played Jonas, who my intention was to become a paladin, but everything in the world seemed to be against me when I did that. So rather than make a new character, I just changed Jonas. And you can do that through things like the world affecting your character and altering your perceptions of reality, and your just like real life does. You get disappointments and you get jubilations from things that happen to you, and they will affect your future. So one of the things you definitely want to do is make sure that you're able to change and not to be afraid of change as your character needs it. The same thing goes with, we've talked about a couple of times, role-playing beyond your character sheet. My friend Brandon has the distinction of being probably the biggest power gamer in our group, although he's not as good as he used to be, and because he tries too much now. When talking about him, when making fun of him for it, because that's how gamers fix things, they ridicule. What he always said was that he doesn't need the skill in something if he can role play it. Basically, if he role plays with me very well and he convinces me of something or talks me into a corner, then he may just win the situation outright, even though his skill is probably like a 1 or a 2, whereas this other character is probably a 10 or a 10, which is the maximum it gets. By the other hand, if I, as the GM, want the character to fail, or potentially want the character to fail, then I'll give him a bonus to it, but then I'll still make him roll the etiquette roll. And if he doesn't succeed, then, I still win. He out role played me, but the situation called for him to still lose that. And usually, if that's the case, I just fudge the roll. But that's a whole other thing.
Another good thing to do when you're coming up with a character concept, or with any character, or developing your character, is probably the most classic way to develop a character in role playing in its basest form, which is come up with something that is not your general personality, or you couldn't normally do in your general personality, so that you could explore a different type of personality trait.
That's basically what role-playing is supposed to be for. I mean, you're supposed to try to be somebody other than you. Role-playing can definitely help you experience life beyond your normal means. Like, in real life, you're never going to encounter a dragon, so you're never going to have to deal with that stressful situation. But if you're role-playing right, if you're role-playing really well, you're going to feel like you're actually in danger, and that all this work you've done and all this effort you've put in is now on the line based on this one little freaking piece of polyurethane that you're going to throw across the table, and it's going to kill you, and it's going to be so mad.
Yep, I've had those moments where I was absolutely just scared. I knew I was going to die, and it was awful, and I'm ready to cry, and I'm freaking out. Then I go, oh, yeah, never mind. I'm okay, guys.
Right. It's
Everything's
just
fine.
a game.
I'm not really going to die. And especially, good role-playing around you helps that a lot, too.
Right, and it depends, too, on the type of game you're playing, which is, there's gaming, there's LARPing, there's tabletop gaming, and there's online gaming. And each has their benefits and their drawbacks, of course. I've always preferred tabletopping, but I've also been LARPing for an extremely long time. And LARPs have some unique challenges and some unique benefits to playing them. You are more likely to get into character easier, and it's going to be a deeper kind of in-character. You're surrounded by people who can help immerse you, and when you feel danger as your character, you really feel danger, because you forget sometimes that guy in front of you that's dressed, in green or orange tape, you forget that he's not actually an orc right there to kill you and hurt you, and that is probably one of the most rewarding aspects of role-playing you can ever get into. I've had that a couple times with tabletop, but mostly with LARPing.
It's really physical, so your adrenaline's pumping, and if this thing's coming after you, you're going to have to run. It's not, my character runs. You're going to actually have to run. And
Which is one of the things that separates tabletopping from LARPing significantly is physical demands, which when you're considering making your character, you have to consider, too, the notion that I'm 6'1", and I'm a little over 240 pounds, a little over 250 pounds, actually, but I can't play an elf.
halfling.
Or a halfling. I could maybe play an elf, but it's kind of a stretch. If you're 6'3" and despite the fact that you have a fantastic beard, you probably shouldn't play a dwarf. I see it a lot in LARPing where people want to play the character beyond who they are. One thing you can't do in a LARP, even though some people try to do it, is you can't describe yourself to someone. They are going to see you. You can't. I got Dave in the middle of a drink on that one.
Jeff wins.
You can't describe yourself during a LARP. The people are going to see you, and it's going to be who you are. You
You are what you are.
Right.
You can't walk up to somebody and go, no, my character's attractive.
Even in tabletoping, I pretty much picture the person's character as looking like them, except with a bow and arrow or a sword or something like that.
Unless there's a
So-
certain degree of aids, usually pictures, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where you can put it in my face and say, no, this is how I look.
Right.
If
But
you're
in
at a
LARPing,
LARP,
it really doesn't work.
if you're at a
No,
LARP,
it
which
doesn't.
has its drawbacks, because you come up with a character. One of the things that when you're coming up with a character in a LARP that you have to consider, you can sit there and do makeup and put little things on your face or whatnot. You can, put prosthetics on and whatnot. You need to focus on what your costuming looks like. So you don't just come up with your actual social personality and mental personality. You have to come up with your fashion personality.
Right.
It can get hard too, because you go from being your character and you'll go over to playing an NPC, and or you come out as a new character, and suddenly you are the same person. So everyone's gonna run up to you and be like, "Oh, hi, you," and you're going, "No, it's not me," and they're going, "Lies! I know it's you. It really is you." No,
It's a hard thing to get over even if you do change your costuming in a LARP, because people are so accustomed to seeing the same person over and over.
Yeah.
I can't walk up to see somebody that, somebody that looks like Dave, looks just like Dave. I'm going to say, "Hey, Dave," and then they're going to slap me in the face for calling him Dave, and when his real name is Bernadette. But, it's a thing. So you definitely have to watch out for that kind of stuff. The costuming that you wear can really affect the way you feel as the character. It's part of that immersion. I've played Jonas for a long time, and Jonas definitely has his style, and I feel off unless I'm wearing my belts the way I wear them. They're just right where everything sits, so I have the swagger, and then the hat, which really seals the deal. I have a hard time getting into character if I don't have the hat with me. So if you change your garb, you change your personality. I play a secondary character called Vol, who the only way I can play this character is if I change my garb entirely.
Well, and people have to be able to. If you're playing multiple characters, you can't change. You can't change yourself. You're still you. So
Yeah.
on the field, people are
You
going to
have to-
see you, and you have to have something obvious that signals who you're playing.
I found wearing wigs helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeff likes to dress as a lady.
I'll dress up at anything. Part of the reason I like playing LARPs is because I get to dress up and be a dumbass for, 4 to 8 hours a month. And I can literally do anything I want because nobody's, as long as I'm not hurting anybody. I like playing characters. A lot of times I'll figure out, I'll ask a GM if I can play something and they won't have anything for me to play. I'm like, well, can I just do whatever I want to do? And they unfortunately say yes. Unfortunately for them. I will just go through and root through the box of garbs, the cases and boxes of garbs in the back there, and I will put on whatever feels right, and I will keep adding on to it until I have a layer that I can't help but come up with. I can't help but be whatever this garb has made me into. I played an NPC called Gertrude, where I was wearing a very tight corset and a very long flowing dress and a huge Viking helmet and giant chunks of leather armor and a bastard sword, and I was going out to sow my wild oats. It was extremely
And so he
entertaining.
did.
Yeah, and it was a very entertaining character for me to play. A lot of the drawbacks to LARPing are not present. In fact, they're things that actually benefit tabletops. As a tabletop player, I can be an attractive female elven warrior paladin, and as long as I can maintain the personality properly, which is difficult for men to do. A lot of men have a hard time playing female characters. A lot of women have a hard time playing male characters, even though they don't think they do. It is a difficult, but it's a chance to role play outside of yourself. You also have the benefit of, in tabletop, being able to truly explore the depths of your imagination, which your imagination is sometimes limited in LARPing by the things you can see and the things that you can touch and the things you can smell and the things you can feel. Whereas in a tabletop, they're only limited to the GM's ability to describe things and the ability for you to be able to imagine those things. One of the things that got me really into role-playing was a game called Hero Quest by Milton Bradley. What got me was when I first got the game, the pieces were much bigger because I was much smaller. And most of the tables that we played on were about eye level. So I could set the whole board up and I could sit down or just slightly crouch and look at the table from eye level. I was seeing the world that these characters were in, these little miniatures that were in. That to me was the final straw in the hat of becoming a total geek. Now, I'm sure it came years before that because I started reading fantasy novels about 2 or 3 years before that even, but I was mostly a science geek before. And then I got into this and it was the fact that my imagination could run away into this other world and I could lose dozens of hours. And I started doing that with Legos and with everything else and seeing things from that perspective. And it was such a huge imagination boost, which I think is totally why I think I like the pictures, be able to see the pictures and build a character based on that.
Tabletop is there's much fewer limitations, but you still have to keep in mind your own limitations of what you can role play. Like I usually don't play characters who are good at figuring things out because I am not a detective.
Right.
I am a very oblivious most of the time. So
When you come into a tabletop situation and developing a character in tabletop, you have the sky's the limit, but there is certain restrictions based off of what you can role play, also based on what you're going to have the most fun with for a more consistent period of time.
Right. It's extremely important.
In a tabletop situation, you're going to have a GM who's going to be dealing with multiple different characters and multiple different things going on in a particular period of time. You have to develop your character to be able to work with a party and be able to stay with the party, so you don't reach that point where where you go, well, my character would just leave this group and go over here.
Yeah, it's happened a couple times in games I've played and games I've run, both where the character's like, well, I've reached the point where I've accomplished all my goals, or the party has become something that I can't be associated with anymore. I have to walk away as a character.
You also have to be able to understand that during your sessions, your GM may not be paying attention to you. You might, the party might be split, because you're never supposed to, but you always do. And so you have to be able to come up with something that you can embrace and maybe look over to one of the other players and sit down and role play and work out and be able to do it without any cues from the GM, which is something that in LARP or in online gaming is not so much a problem, because the map is created for you in online gaming, and in LARP you're actually standing in the woods somewhere, so you can find something to do. The GM is not describing that there is a tree there. Oh, look, there's a limb that just cracked and fell on your head and now you have a concussion. No, it actually just happened. So work with it, roll with it, and see what happens.
Right. One of the benefits of LARPing is you are basically always the center of your own story, whereas in tabletop you are either the center of the GM story or someone else's. Going beyond that, you get into online role playing, which is a lot like LARPing in that everything is always there for you, like you said. You can try to figure out little things. The biggest difference between tabletopping and online, I think, is the depth of using your imagination. In an online game, your imagination is kind of more the figuring out things rather than the immersing yourself. The difference between the LARPing and the online gaming is that the physical interaction isn't there. Everything is visually there, but physically it's not.
So I was wondering, does online role playing really exist? Do people really online? Do
Yes.
people really
Yes.
role play in
Okay.
online games?
They do.
You have
Yes and no.
You have muds, you have mushes. And when I started role playing, we would get on Telnet. One of the best setting role playing games that I had been involved in was a mud called Harshlands, which was based off of a role playing game called Harn World, and it was very in depth. It was the role playing was very intense. It was very, very well done.
Those things existed for a long time, and they do still exist to some extent now. I don't think they're nearly as popular as they used to be.
Role playing did exist. It's just very, very difficult to do. Oftentimes, only done within guilds or between guilds.
There is the potential for online role playing, and if you find the right group, you find the right mud, the right mush.
At
But
the same time, you can get into some really in-depth stories on those too, and
Sure.
have some really great role-playing experiences on
That's
those.
actually in to this point nowadays. If you're getting onto a text-based online role playing game,
you're doing it solely.
you're
to
doing
role
it
play.
solely for role play.
The idea of online role playing in the typical consumer-based MMOs, like, well, DC Online, Star Trek Online, Star Wars, the Old Republic, WoW, EverQuest. If you look for it hard enough, you're going to find it. But unless you go into it, generally speaking, with a group of friends who are going to role play amongst themselves, and other people are going to see it from the outside of you role playing, generally you will never be interacted with in a role playing way. You'll be
Yeah.
talked to about, what are you doing for this? Do you want to go farm this over here? Do you want to go run this mission over here? That kind of stuff. But the role playing aspect of it usually isn't there.
When developing characters for your MMOs and whatnot, one of the chief ways of doing it that a lot of people end up doing is they develop the character they know how to, the class or whatever they know how to play, or they feel the most comfortable playing, and they develop a story around that. The few times that I did role playing on WoW, World of Warcraft in general, Blizzard did a really good job of having a very in-depth and epic storyline, and the setting is so in-depth that you can come up with a lot of very good character concepts and work with it just fine.
Right. One of the big things about when you're building characters for online RPGs, you have to put a lot more effort into it for MMOs, or not for MMOs, for muds and mushes. Really know what you're going into. For games like SWTOR, which is a game I'm currently, in theory, playing, when I made my character for that, I came up with the whole character concept, and I built it based on the appearance of the character that I made. So again, it comes back to looking at pictures and building on that.
One of the problems with MMO role playing is the fact that you have some of the MMOs are very, very good in you can customize your toon, your sprite, whatever, to an amazing degree.
Sure.
Some of them aren't so great with that. WoW is not particularly great with that, but you got some work and customize them based off of the equipment that you're wearing and whatnot. But you're pretty much gonna look the same as everybody else, and so you, working with how do you describe your character, how do you describe what your character looks like. There are certain tools. There's an add-on program called Curse that has various different add-ons that can help you come up with a description of a character and whatnot. So if you want to go more in depth, like you do with tabletop or anything like that, coming up with a more in-depth name, more in-depth description of how you look, more in-depth idea of mannerisms, you can actually get these add-ons so that when people walk past and they click on you or they look at you, they can see this list of things that you have.
Right. So on that, does anybody have any final thoughts? No?
I'm good.
All right. So that's the quest for today, episode 1 of the first series. We should be back in the next show. Not sure what we're going to cover yet, but we'll let you know. So yeah, so long, and thanks for all the fish.
Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans. You know it hurts me so. Baby, I'm way down here. You know I'm way down here. Baby, I'm way down here in a rolling fog, baby, please.